The US dollar has been the global reserve currency for, 100 plus years, whatever it's been. And if that changes, even if it's still the Western Hemisphere reserve currency, but there's now an Eastern Hemisphere reserve currency, and you do get two or more different worlds, changes the game a lot. Right?
It does.
You two are looking at me like I'm absolutely fucking crazy.
That right there, though, that is the changing world order. And I mean, it's not this scenario per se, but this has been written about a lot. Like Ray Dalio's book, which is called The Changing World Order, it talks about, there's the declining, current superpower, and then there's this ascending power right now. Right now, that one is China. And if you look back over history, you can kind of see these cycles and how these reserve currencies, the country with that reserve currency status, it changes over time. So it's a cycle.
I think Ray's wrong.
You think he's wrong?
I think he's wrong, not in his analysis of how the world operates and not in his analysis of the fact that there is transitions between these. But I think that he is looking within a smaller box than actually the full aperture of the game board, if you will. And he's looking just at country versus country. And I think the part that he's missing is that the ascending currency is not attached to a country. So he's looking at it as if the US dollar and the US economy falters, then, China is going to go and overtake them. Nope. They are all going to be disrupted if the contrarian thing that's different, right? And in terms of innovation and disruption, you have to do something different and be right. Now, if you do something different and you're wrong, then you're just an idiot, right? But if you do something different and you're right, that's where true disruption and innovation happens. And Ray is only looking at the fiat currency system. He's only looking at the legacy economic system. In 13 years, we now have the equivalent of 50% of the US population using a new currency that didn't exist 13 years ago. 150 plus million people use Bitcoin. And some of them only use it for savings.
Do they use it or they have it? They own it?
Having it is using it, right?
Okay.
The majority of use of the US dollar is simply to hold it. And I don't know exactly what what all the data is, but if you go and you look, just think of the money that the average citizen has, right? Most of the time, and most of the things that they do is they just hold the currency. They may invest it, they may buy things, but if you look on a month-to-month basis, right, if you have $1,000 in your bank account and you spend 400 of them, then in that month, what'd you do? Majority of it was you were just holding the currency. And so holding ends up being a big piece of it. It's a store of value. You're trying to hold the value. Now, it's a shitty one over a really long period of time. But I think that's where the analysis falls down, which is not how the world has worked in the past. He nails that. Like, I've learned so much from him. He also understands that, like, the U.S. debt to GDP, not looking great. There's all these, like, warning signs. When things start to change, that's up for debate, like, on a timeline basis. But the threat is not another fiat currency or another fiat-based economy. And it's not even so much a threat as much as just, like, the next phase here is in the digital world. And what we're watching is, like, is the digital economy or the analog economy bigger now? And is the internet an American economy? Or is it a Russian economy? Or is it a Chinese economy?
Global
or is it
economy.
It kind of doesn't fit, right? Like, people will say, like, Alibaba sales are, like, that accounts towards the Chinese government or towards the Chinese GDP. And, like, sure, okay, because that's where most of the workers are based. That's where the headquarters are, all that stuff. What happens when companies are fully remote? Now who gets to claim the GDP? Now they'll go, well, where's the company incorporated? But really, if you think about that, there's companies that are now growing where they have immense amount of employees all around the world. And so is that GDP really concentrated where the company is founded or incorporated? Or is there economic impact in all these other economies? So some people say, okay, well, let's actually go look on, like, an Amazon. How much of the buying and selling is happening in, I don't know, Mexico? And they'll say, well, how do we calculate what's in Mexico? If the buyer's in Mexico. Okay, but what if the seller's in America? Does that count towards the Mexican GDP or the American GDP? Like, you start getting into these questions and you're like, it's not as clear cut. People will come up with definitions. They will come up with a way to calculate it, but it's just not as obvious as it used to be because the friction has gone down so much. And so I just think that the big, like, out of left field disruption is we have a brand new currency that 150 million people have adopted. And right now they're actually using it as not as a replacement, they're using it as an augmentation. But if billions of people around the world augment their fiat currency with a savings tool, I mean, that's pretty crazy to me.